the advantage of going at the end of the day is you get to hear what everybody has said before you and you try not to repeat. The disadvantage is I have a long list of things that I've been told I'm going to talk to you about. So hopefully I'm going to be able to hit all those. One of the things we've talked about so far is that definitely people communicate differently. And I think we can all agree there's a lot of people out there. And I think Dr. Taby Kaler said it best. If you want them to listen, talk their language. Dr. Kaler created PCM, Process Communication Model, which is at the center of what we do. And it's a language-based personality model. So it allows us to gain great insight into how someone wants to be interacted with if we have their language and if we learn to understand how to read those clues so that we can really understand what they want so that they can actually listen to us. There are 6 personality styles in the model. What's unique about this model, again, is that it's language-based. So each of the 6 styles has a very distinct language pattern, a very distinct communication preference. There are some people that are very formal in their presentations. There are others that say, hey, how you doing? What's up? One of my favorite calls of all times, this guy actually starts a customer interaction and says, dude, this is Ben. This is how he starts his conversation with I would trust that not a lot of you would start that way when you call in to a contact center. But for him, it was a way to just say, hey, life is too serious. It doesn't have to be. Help me out. I'm looking for some help. Each of these styles has their own psychological need. It is something that really is how they're hardwired, what they're looking for to be met in a positive way so that they can be successful in interacting with people in the world. They have distinct worldviews, and they each have a superpower, as you've heard earlier. And my job today is to introduce you to each of these 6 styles in a little more detail to give you a little more indication about who you are and about those that you work with, that you live with, that you interact with every day. How many of you have children? How many of you have more than one? How soon did you know the second one was different than the first? Yeah. And that's what's amazing about this model. Sometimes I get questions like, well, how can I identify what somebody is? It's that simple. Your kids, and by the way, the other piece, how early did they learn to ask mom for something differently than dad? Right? So this whole piece of getting people to listen to really get what you want, it's not new. And our children do it better than anyone. So these 6 styles, the first one I want to introduce you to today, you've already met. David very proudly wore his super badge up here of planning. For the organizer, this is formerly thoughts. So for the organizer, they're logical, responsible, organized. Their lists have lists when they're in distress. They logically think through the day. They think in bullets. They don't want a lot of color, not a lot of pop-up. It's really about what's the data, what are the specifics. If an organizer is packing for a weekend trip and they ask their spouse, what's the weather going to be like? And they get that, oh, it's going to be a beautiful fall weekend. That is not helpful for an organizer. An organizer is looking for those specifics. There's a 76% chance of rain on Saturday night. So that means they better pack an umbrella. Because if they're at an event and it's raining and they're the only ones without an umbrella, they're not going to look very logical, responsible, or organized. So their structure is really about making sure they have the specific data points, that they can be as responsible as possible in a very logical manner. These are the folks, by the way, that hate surprises. Do not surprise them. In fact, if you work for an organizer, get in the habit of telling them things on a regular basis ahead of time so that they're never surprised by anything. When you have organizers that work for you, make sure you give them all the information as possible so they have the specifics so they can be successful, and also so that you don't surprise them at the end of the day. If you give them a project that's going to last 2 weeks and the night before you call up and say, yeah, I'm not sure if I mentioned this one piece, their mind automatically goes to how much work, how much time is still available, and whether they can get that done on time. So really important to steer away from that. We hear their language. That makes sense. I think that's a good plan. These folks also will go first, second, third. Now, other styles will start, and you'll begin to pick up on this as you now know this. People will start and they'll say, well, first of all, You'll never hear a second, third. You may hear a B, you may hear just something else, but there's not that structure. When an organizer starts, you will hear the 3 data points that they've set out to talk to you about. At the other end of the spectrum is the connector. Warm, sensitive, caring. Where's Jean? So Jean, earlier, when she was asked, she responded to the question, what do you want from a customer service interaction? Does anyone remember what she said? She wants to feel good about it. She wants to, make a connection. And at the end of the day, I just want to be happy about it. That's a connector. Those are the feeling states. I want to feel good about this, and I want you to feel good about your interaction with me. They're warm, sensitive, caring. These are the folks that can ask how you are just by raising their eyebrows and looking at you. It's like, and it's just their way of making sure you're okay. It's a personal touch. If you fly a lot, watch people walking down the aisles, because this is a great way to watch for personality. The connector will walk down, and they smile at people as they catch your eye. And they're walking, and it's just they want to feel comfortable. And it's like, it's a little awkward. You're like, I've never met you before, but okay, I'll smile back if that's what it takes. But it's just this way that they want to be accepted by people on the plane. They sit down, they greet you. It's not how I'm hardwired to board a plane, but now that I know the motto, I always try to be a little more gentle in offering, how my reception is to them sitting next to me. They're natural with empathy. On our teams, these are the folks that really want to drive consensus. They want people to feel good about being on a team. They want to be on a team. For recognition, they actually are looking for how you feel about them being on the team, not their work. A lot of us will give recognition. That was a great job on that project. What they really want to hear is that you made a difference for me on that project and our customers. It's just a very slight difference in the language that we use, but it hits home time and time again. I had a connector come work for me, with Becca, like 6 years ago. And she's a connector, she's wonderful. She sits down, she says, Melissa, I want you to teach me. I want you to really, make me a better presenter. Just be nice when you do it. And again, that connector piece of just being nice and being wonderful. These two personalities make up 55% of the North American population. The connector is 30%. It's the largest single demographic. The organizer is 25%. So we often see them in meetings. Same meeting, same discussion point. What's happening in their head? Very different. For the organizer, this doesn't make sense. For the connector, it just doesn't feel right. They don't know exactly why, but it doesn't feel right. Very strong intuition. The organizer comes flat out with the plan. They've already logically said what comes next. For the connector, they might ask what the group wants to do, because again, they want to know that consensus. They know what they want to do. Fiercely goal-oriented, but goal-oriented for the team. Organizer, goal-oriented for their own individual accomplishment and the team accomplishment. The organizer, the next step. The connector, does everyone agree? We've talked about distress some. So distress is when things become important, when they're unknown, when they're uncertain. If you're upset, you're in distress. But if you're in distress, you're not necessarily upset. For the organizer, you will begin to hear them over-detail and over-specify. For the connector, you will hear them over-accommodate for others. So in a situation in a meeting, you will hear that organizer over-specify. Can you repeat that? I think I may have misunderstood when you described the build-out plan for the fourth quarter's team objective and how that aligns, because they're telling you that you've heard everything, but they're still not really understanding what happens next. The connector, I'm sorry if I missed something. I just want to make sure I understand. They'll take responsibility for that miscommunication so that you don't feel like you didn't do a good job. The advisor, dedicated, observant, conscientious. This group is only 10% of the North American population, but everyone in this room, and I guarantee every one of your agents, is convinced that it makes more than 10% of the North American population. These are the folks that will become indignant when things aren't done correctly, when people don't follow the rules, when they don't do what they should do. This is the group that requires respect. And respect is a two-way street. If you question something that they say, they may take that as a sign of disrespect, and you'll go right down the rabbit hole. What's important to them, beliefs, their value statements. For organizations, and I've seen this time and time over the last 13, 14 years, they have great pride. They choose to work for you. They choose to work for you as a manager, as a leader. They choose to work for your organization because of what it represents. That mission and value, not just something that's in the entryway when someone walks in. They expect you to hold up to that because that's what they come to work to you to hold up those values. So that's what they expect to see in return. Their language will hear, in my opinion, I believe, the truth is, you people should. That's a favorite one. You people should. And if you don't hear it come out of their mouth, you'll either see that finger wag or you'll just kind of hear it. The original, creative, spontaneous, playful. This is, hey dude, it's Ben. Think Robin Williams. Think Jack Black, Ellen DeGeneres. People that just enjoy life in the moment. They live life in the moment. There's no planning because there's no fun in that. So they're the ones that might break up an uncomfortable silence by telling an inappropriate joke. Because what they want to do is get you to laugh, get you to lighten up. Life doesn't have to be serious. We all take the garbage cans out, but the original is the one doing a little dance, doing a little boogie as they take the can down the driveway, because they just enjoy it. I was driving down the street the other day, and I saw a runner come up to the corner, the light switched, he's running in place, and he starts singing, and he's just kind of like dancing as he's waiting. It's like somebody just enjoy, hey, there's a red light, no big deal. He's getting energy just from it. People started honking, he's waving. Great energy boost. Not a lot of people will do that. You know, you see the rest of them all just monitoring their heart rate to make sure that they don't lose that stride that they're on. Cool, awesome. Oh, this is miserable. This is just horrible. I have a godson who's 7 years old. He's an original. Ask him to clean his room. Every sock weighs 5,000 pounds. It's so hard. I can't do it. It's just because if I spend time doing this, I'm not going to get to go have fun, go enjoy life. As an employer, as a manager, I love the originals on my team because they're the ones that think outside the box. They find those creative answers to problems because they're not constrained by thinking through the rules or following logic. They can just see the possibilities, and they'll be able to help us solve problems in different ways than we do without them. A typical organization is going to have a makeup of all of these personality styles. And if we look at a typical call center, we're going to see a lot of connectors. So in your contact centers, what percentage female? More than 60? More than 70? Because connectors are the largest single demographic, with 75% of that being female, we typically see more females or more connectors in the call center. Organizers, 21%. It's great because if someone has a problem, they know what processes to follow. An advisor, they believe in your company, they believe in customer service, what we should do. The original, it was a job, this is a cool environment, it seems fun. I was in call centers, as Frank mentioned, a long time ago, and I had a call center director in Johnson City, Tennessee. I now know he was an original. But for years, he would drive me crazy. We'd have a big tour come in. The first thing he does, the first time, he took them all to the break room and showed them our Papa-Shot and how we had barbecues out back and that this was a fun place to work. And I'm like, no one's going to buy because we're a fun place to work. And he's like, well, sure they will. Now I know for him, that was the most important thing. He was giving them the best stuff that he had. They weren't originals. It wasn't what they were looking for on that tour. What really gets interesting here, so we can see the rep distribution, but when we really want to start looking at is what's the supervisor strength? You know, how are they interacting with their agents? Are there natural connections? Are there people that get along better with some folks and not as well with others? Are they communicating well? With 38% connectors, what's difficult for them is delivering a difficult message, a hard message. So if they're not very comfortable giving that kind of feedback, we need to make sure they're getting the training so that they are comfortable giving that feedback. with organizers, with the advisors, as a team, are they getting enough representation? Are they getting enough of the communication that they need in order to be successful at their job? So training's going to look very different for those groups. Well, then when we get to trainers, we see that there's a very different makeup here as well. For this client, we spent some time because they had 51% connectors as their trainers. What was happening was enough time wasn't being spent on process because it wasn't a comfort zone for the connector trainers. So we spent time up training the trainers on how to feel more comfortable. And what we did was we just changed it. Instead of it being 3 weeks of process training, it was 3 weeks of the best ways you can help your customers. So we reframed what was actually being taught and a much better output. The trainers were much more comfortable. You look at the managers and the executives here. So the manager pool, as they're communicating back into the organization, they're going to fall on their natural language patterns. So if at the executive level, this comes out and it's an organizer or thoughts, it's going to be very logical and linear. It's not going to be the why we're doing this, why we're creating something for our customers. It's certainly not going to involve that we're working together as a team. So that communication can fall very flat for the people that are reading it. So what we typically do is we take the executive level or the managers, we look back at the reps, at the supervisor, who's the actual audience? How do you adjust then those communications to deal with that? We recently moved offices here in Chicago, and for us, or in Austin, sorry, we have 3 offices, one in Edina, one in Chicago, and one here in Austin. Very different makeups when we look at the PPI distributions across. So we communicate slightly differently. We put different kind of lunch programs in place. We communicate them so that they're more appealing to those folks. Going through this move, a lot of organizers. There are developers, a lot of organizers. We handled the communications down here much differently than we did when we moved offices in Chicago last year. Because what they're looking for is specifics. They want to know the when, they want to know the data, they want to know exactly what's going to happen and what has happened. They want to see it being checked off the list. So we change our communications in order to make sure that they get what they need. So when we moved in last Wednesday, people were more comfortable with the change than if they hadn't received any of those specifics. There were no surprises, which is hard for me because I like surprises. So I wanted to build a lot of surprises in, and so we built some little surprises in so that I could be happy too. But really kind of interesting when you begin to break it down, you think about, again, if you want someone to listen, you need to talk to them in the language that they want to hear and how they take it in. Very important for motivation. For an organizer, you want to motivate based upon individual accomplishment. For an advisor, you want to motivate based upon their contributions to the organization. For a connector, they're wonderful as they are. They're part of the team, an important part of the team. For that original, walk by, give them a high five, that's all the energy they need. It's like, yeah, I love working here, it's just cool. Give that motivation, then we get the discretionary effort. We get all the other components that come naturally with that. And hopefully for all of us, a lower attrition rate. Because at the end of the day, that has a huge impact on our ability to do our business. The last 2 styles, the doer, 5% of the North American population. As Jason said, Trump is the best example for this that we could possibly ever try to explain. But this is also why he craves incidents. His superpower is resourcefulness. So his psych need of incidents causes him to stir the pot when things aren't going his way. And that stirring of the pot is what we see constantly. And most of you have watched it and said, what is he thinking? Yeah, he's really not thinking. He's just thinking like, how do I stir the pot? How do I create a situation so that I can win? Jerry Maguire, for those that have seen that movie, another great example of actions, or now the doer. Mark Cuban, a lot of guys that just create these winning situations. The dreamer, 10% of the North American population. These are folks that have a very rich internal world, a very rich internal imagination. The closest that most of us can get to this, have you ever been driving home, you come up the exit, you get off the exit ramp, and all of a sudden you come to a stop at the light and you realize you haven't been present for the last 5 minutes, the last 5 miles? For most of us, it's a little disturbing It's like, where have I been? Something could have happened. I wasn't present. For the dreamer, this is their ideal state. They drift off into this place where they're never bored. Their superpower is imagination. What they need is solitude. Most of us like alone time. We like alone time so we can go get things done, right? Without people bothering us. For the dreamer, it really is just about being alone, not doing anything, just having your mind wander wherever it can wander. 6 personalities, 7.4 billion people. So the big question is how to get it right. You don't have to study the behavioral model for years and years and years. What you can actually do, there's 3 steps that I recommend everybody just start with. 1, listen to the other person. Really listen to what they're saying and how they're saying it. Are they more casual? Are they very professional? Are there lines to cross? Are they huggers? Are they not huggers? This was great. I was working with a group of executives at one of our clients. I think there were 7 advisors and 1 connector. So it was a very lopsided group, and they were talking about how they were having troubles actually getting things done because they debated the points too long. They all had to find the right solution rather than moving forward. And it was great because they were all very solid in their positions. And so I walked up to one of them. I just started to walk up to her like this. I was like, thank you so much. And she literally backed up for me. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry, but I'm not a hugger. And I'm like, well, I'm not either. But you have 38% of your agents, 30% of your population is a connector. When you back away from somebody giving you a hug, you're saying they're not acceptable. So we listen to what people say, how they say it, and then we have to watch our own responses to it. And it's very, very powerful in that piece. It's not in what they say, but how they say it. What is that structure? Is it in bullet points? Is it the emoticons? You know, how they say it, whether in email or face-to-face, those are your clues. Follow the platinum rule. We have always heard the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would like to be done unto. This is really about the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would like to be done unto. Often it's inconsistent with what we want. But if we can figure out why it's inconsistent, if we had the choice, we would automatically do that. My mom thinks that I now give the best birthday cards or holiday cards in the world because I never realized my mom was an organizer. So I would get her those mom cards, you know, with flowers and just all this piece. It didn't mean anything for her, but just a simple happy birthday, you were born today. It's very factual, very specific, and she's very comfortable with it. We don't have to get into any hugging. It's just fine for her. So it's really about thinking about what that other person wants rather than what we want ourselves. If you want someone to listen, speak their language.